Unit 2, Developmental Psychology. Presentation 1, Explanations of Attachment, Learning Theory. Attachment is an emotional bond between two people. Being attached to your loved ones is a two-way process. Both individuals experience anxiety when separated and enjoy the sense of closeness and comfort experienced when together.
One of the important questions about infant attachment is why an infant becomes attached to one person rather than any other person. Psychologists have put forward two main theories, and in this presentation we look at one of them, learning theory.
Explaining attachment using learning theory. Learning theory is a general explanation of behaviour. In the 1950s, learning theory was the theory in psychology. It was, and is still, used to explain many different kinds of behaviour, such as aggression, mental illness, morality, and just about any behaviour you care to name. It was used to explain attachment as well. The core belief is that all of these behaviours develop because you learn them, which is why it is called learning theory.
There are two processes that are used to explain the learning of attachment: classical conditioning and operant conditioning.
We'll begin with classical conditioning.
When a baby is born, it shows an inborn response to having food. The response is a sense of pleasure. Learning theorists say that food is an unconditioned stimulus, or UCS for short, and the sense of pleasure is an unconditioned response, or UCR. The term unconditioned means unlearned. The stimulus-response link between food and pleasure has not been learned, it's just there from birth.
Along comes mother, who feeds the baby. The baby doesn't have any particular feelings about this person yet. It's just a smiling face. So this person is referred to as a neutral stimulus, or NS.
Gradually, the baby begins to form an association between the mother, on the one hand, and getting food and feeling a sense of pleasure on the other. Every time the baby sees the mother, this predicts that pleasure is coming soon.
Eventually, just seeing the mother leads to a response of pleasure. The mother has now become the conditioned stimulus, which produces a conditioned response.
The end result is that an attachment has formed. The baby loves his or her mother because she creates a sense of pleasure. In fact, an attachment could be formed in this way with anyone who is associated with food. For example, if it's the baby's brother who regularly feeds the baby, then the brother would become the baby's attachment figure, according to learning theory.
Learning theorists also use operant conditioning to explain attachment.
An operant conditioning explanation of attachment was put forward by Dollard and Miller in 1950.
We start again with a newborn baby. When the baby is hungry, it feels very uncomfortable. This discomfort creates a drive to find something to reduce the hunger. When the infant is fed, the drive is reduced, and this produces a feeling of satisfaction, which is rewarding and makes the infant want to repeat this behaviour. The special term used by learning theorists is that the food is reinforcing. The fact that the food reduces the sense of discomfort means that the behaviour that produced food will now be more likely to be repeated. Food is called a primary reinforcer. Next, we come to a secondary reinforcer. The secondary reinforcer is something that is associated with food.
Could it be the mother?
Exactly. The mother's association with food is learned through classical conditioning. But now, this becomes part of the operant conditioning account. The person doing the feeding becomes a source of reward in his or her own right. Attachment occurs because the child seeks the secondary reinforcer, the person who can supply the reward of food and reduce discomfort.
So here again, food is the source of reinforcement. For this reason, learning theories are sometimes called the cupboard love theories of attachment.
The key difference between the two accounts is that, according to classical conditioning, attachment occurs because of an association, whereas, in operant conditioning, attachment primarily occurs because of reinforcement.
Evaluating the learning theory of attachment. The main problem for learning theory is that there is clear evidence that food is not the main factor in the development of attachment. The classic study that demonstrated this was conducted in the 1950s by Harry Harlow. Harlow used infant rhesus monkeys in a fascinating experiment. The young monkeys were separated from their real mothers and placed in a cage where there were two artificial mothers constructed out of wire mesh. One was the lactating mother, which had a feeding bottle attached, and the other was wrapped in soft cloth but offered no food.
According to learning theory, we would expect the monkeys to prefer the lactating mother and to spend more time with her than with the surrogate mother who provided no food.
This is not what happened. The monkeys spent most of their time cuddling the cloth-covered mother, only going to the lactating mother for brief sips of milk. The monkeys would cling to the cloth-covered mother, especially when they were frightened. This is a proximity-seeking behaviour which is characteristic of attachment. The conclusion was that the monkeys sought contact comfort rather than food.
Of course, this study involved monkeys rather than humans, so we might be wary about applying the findings to human behaviour. However, rhesus monkeys are a closely related species to human beings, and, in any case, there is also research support from human studies that has supported these conclusions.
In 1964, Rudolf Schaefer and Peggy Emerson published the findings of their observational study of 60 babies in Glasgow. The babies and their families had been observed regularly in their own homes over the period of about a year. Schaefer and Emerson found that the infants were not necessarily most attached to the person who was with them most of the time. What emerged as a more significant factor in determining attachment was interaction and responsiveness between an adult and the infant.
There is one more point of evaluation to consider. Learning theory suggests that attachment is learned. In other words, it is a product of nurture rather than nature. The alternative view, Bowlby's theory, proposes that the desire to seek contact comfort and the desire to form attachments are innate.
What can we conclude? Cupboard love is not likely to be the best explanation for attachment because research shows that infants do not necessarily become most strongly attached to the person who feeds them. However, classical and operant conditioning might be part of the story of attachment because attention and responsiveness of the caregiver toward the child can be reinforcing.